My brothers and sisters, I need you to lean in close because what I'm about to share with you is going to shift the way you see yourself. It's going to awaken something deep inside of you. You've been told a version of history that left out the power, the presence, the undeniable impact of Black people in the Bible. But today, we set the record straight. Today, we reclaim the truth. I want you to imagine for a moment that you were never meant to be small. You were never meant to be hidden. From the very first pages of creation, from the lands of Eden to the powerful kingdom of Cush, you were there. Your ancestors were there. Black men and women played a role so significant, so divine, that it cannot be ignored any longer. You see, we've been conditioned to believe that our history began with struggle, but I came to tell you that our history began with greatness. It began with wisdom. It began with strength. The Queen of Sheba, a Black woman, stood before the wisest king in history and left him in awe. Simon of Cyrene, a Black man, carried the cross for Jesus himself. And when Jesus' life was in danger, where did he find safety? Africa, among people who looked just like us. Do you see what I'm saying? Do you feel it in your spirit? You have been powerful from the beginning. You have been chosen from the start. And today, you're going to hear 7 shocking truths about Black people in the Bible, truths that will remind you of who you really are. Because once you know your history, once you know the power running through your veins, there is no limit to what you can do. Are you ready? Let's go. From the very foundation of human existence, Africa has played a central role in shaping civilization. Science and history both confirm that life began on the African continent, and the Bible aligns with this truth. The Garden of Eden, described in Genesis, was surrounded by rivers like the Pishon and the Gihon, which flowed around the land of Cush, an ancient name for a region in Africa. This tells us that the earliest biblical figures, including Adam and Eve, were likely of African descent or had deep connections to the African landscape. When we talk about Noah, we're talking about the man God chose to restart humanity after the great flood. His descendants became the fathers of nations, including Cush, Ethiopia, Mizraim, Egypt, and Put, Libya, all of which were African territories. This means that from the very beginning, Africa was not just present in biblical history, it was foundational to it. Black people were not bystanders in the biblical narrative. They were key figures in God's divine plan. Ancient Egypt, one of the most advanced civilizations in history, was a powerhouse of science, mathematics, and governance. And it played a significant role in biblical events. Abraham, Joseph, and even Jesus himself spent time in Egypt, a nation led and populated by African people. Moses, one of the greatest prophets in the Bible, had an African connection through his wife Zipporah, a Cushite woman. This means that not only were African people deeply involved in the biblical story, but they were also woven into the very fabric of God's chosen leadership. The strength and wisdom of Black people have been evident since the earliest days of humanity. Whether as kings, queens, prophets, or protectors, they have always been a part of God's unfolding story. Recognizing this truth empowers us to see ourselves not as victims of history, but as vital contributors to it. When we understand that our lineage traces back to the very foundation of civilization, we stand taller. We walk with confidence. We embrace the greatness that has always been within us. The Bible is not just a story of faith, it is a story of identity. And for Black people, that identity is rooted in strength, wisdom, and divine purpose. The truth is clear. Black people were there from the beginning, shaping the course of history in ways that can never be erased. Moses, one of the most significant figures in the Bible, had a direct and powerful connection to Africa. His leadership, faith, and divine calling are well known, but what many overlooked is his deep bond with an Ethiopian woman. The Bible explicitly states in Numbers 12:01 that Moses married a Cushite woman, referring to a woman from the land of Cush, which is modern-day Ethiopia or Sudan. This single fact is profound because it demonstrates the integral role that African people played in biblical history, not as outsiders, but as direct participants in God's divine plan. The Cushites were known for their strength, beauty, and wisdom, and their influence was widely recognized throughout ancient times. In biblical texts, Ethiopia, Cushite, is often depicted as a powerful and respected nation. The significance of Moses' marriage to a Cushite woman speaks volumes about the racial and cultural diversity present in biblical times, contradicting modern misconceptions that separate Africa from biblical history. This union challenges any notion that Africa was absent from the spiritual and historical evolution of God's people. What makes this story even more powerful is the reaction of Moses' own family. Miriam and Aaron, his sister and brother, criticized him for marrying a Cushite woman. Their opposition was not just about personal preference. It reflected deeper societal biases. But God himself intervened. In a dramatic display of divine justice, God struck Miriam with leprosy for speaking against Moses' wife. This act showed that God did not tolerate discrimination or prejudice based on ethnicity. It was a powerful reminder that love, unity, and faith were what mattered most, not race or background. This story serves as a testament to the prominence and acceptance of Black people in biblical times. It reinforces the idea that Africa was not just a passive observer in history, but an active, essential part of God's chosen narrative. Moses, a leader chosen by God to free the Israelites, was connected to Africa not only through his upbringing in Egypt, but also through marriage. His story dismantles false narratives that attempt to separate Africa from Christianity, proving that Black people were always present in the faith's foundation. By recognizing this connection, we reclaim a legacy of strength and faith. Moses' marriage to a Cushite woman is more than just a footnote in history. It is a declaration that Africa has always been a part of God's divine plan. The Queen of Sheba is one of the most fascinating and powerful women in biblical history, a true symbol of Black excellence, wisdom, and wealth. She ruled over a vast and prosperous kingdom believed to be in modern-day Ethiopia or Yemen, and was known for her intelligence, leadership, and immense riches. Her story is one of ambition, curiosity, and a thirst for knowledge. qualities that define great leaders throughout history. When she heard about the unmatched wisdom of King Solomon, she refused to rely on second-hand accounts. Instead, she journeyed across the desert with a grand caravan, bringing gold, spices, and precious stones to test Solomon with deep and challenging questions. This act alone speaks to her confidence and determination. She did not come as a mere admirer. She came as an equal, a ruler in her own right, seeking dialogue with the wisest king in history. The Bible says that Solomon was impressed by her intellect and the depth of her inquiries. She was not just wealthy, she was deeply knowledgeable, commanding respect in the presence of one of the greatest kings of all time. Their exchange is a testament to the influence of African leadership and wisdom in biblical history. Some traditions even suggest that their encounter led to the birth of a royal lineage that would shape Ethiopian history for generations. Her story proves that Black women have always been at the forefront of history, leading, learning, and leaving a lasting legacy. The Queen of Sheba was not just a visitor to Solomon's court. She was a reminder that Africa's greatness has always been undeniable, and Black excellence has always been present in God's divine plan. When King Herod issued a brutal decree to kill all male infants in Bethlehem, fearing the rise of a new king, Mary and Joseph were faced with an urgent and life-threatening decision. They needed a place of refuge, a land where Jesus would be safe from persecution. And where did they go? Egypt, an African nation. This was not by coincidence. This was divine orchestration. Egypt, a land of Black and brown people, became the sanctuary for the Savior of the world. It was Africa that protected Jesus in his most vulnerable years. The very land that had once enslaved the Israelites now served as a place of divine protection for the Messiah. This challenges many modern perspectives that disconnect Africa from the biblical narrative. The truth is, Africa was not only present, but played a crucial role in ensuring that Jesus could fulfill his mission. This moment in history is profound. It tells us that Africa was a place of refuge, a place of safety, a place where God's purpose could be preserved. It speaks to the power, strength, and divine role of African nations throughout biblical history. This was not a one-time occurrence. Time and time again, Africa has been at the center of God's plan. Recognizing this truth shifts our understanding of history. It reminds us that Black people have always been part of the spiritual story of faith, redemption, and salvation. Jesus' time in Africa is proof that God saw the continent as a place of purpose, a place strong enough to shelter the most important life ever lived. Africa was not a bystander in history. It was a protector of destiny. As Jesus walked toward Calvary, beaten, bruised, and struggling under the weight of the cross, the Roman soldiers looked into the crowd and pulled out a man, Simon of Cyrene. He was not a disciple. He was not expecting to be part of this moment. He was just a man from North Africa, a place known for its rich and powerful history. Yet in this defining moment, he was chosen to carry the weight of salvation. Cyrene, located in modern-day Libya, was a well-known African city, home to a thriving Jewish community. Simon was likely in Jerusalem for the Passover, a holy time of worship and reflection. But on that day, he was given an unexpected task, one that would forever link Black people to the suffering and sacrifice of Jesus Christ. Simon carrying the cross is not just a historical event. It is a symbol of the strength and resilience of Black people throughout time. It represents the burdens carried, the struggles endured, and the unwavering faith that has defined generations. Simon did not resist. He stepped forward, lifted the cross, and walked with Jesus. This act is a reflection of the role Black people have played in history, lifting, supporting, and carrying burdens that were never theirs to bear. But here is the revelation. Simon did not just carry the cross. He walked alongside Christ. He was there in that final moment, present in the most sacred sacrifice of all time. This means that Black people were never on the margins of the Christian story. We were there, at the very center of it. Simon's story is a reminder that we are strong, we are chosen, and we have always been a part of God's plan. The Ethiopian eunuch is one of the most powerful and often overlooked figures in the New Testament. His story, found in Acts 8:26-40, is not just about a man's conversion. It is a testament to the deep and early connection between Africa and Christianity. This Ethiopian official was not just any man. He was a high-ranking treasurer under the Queen of Ethiopia, a man of power, wealth, and influence. He had traveled all the way to Jerusalem to worship, showing his deep spiritual hunger and commitment to God. As he was returning home, reading the book of Isaiah, God sent Philip, one of Jesus' disciples, to meet him on the road. The eunuch was reading about the prophecy of the suffering Messiah, but did not fully understand its meaning. Philip explained to him that the prophecy was about Jesus Christ, the one who had come to save all people. Moved by the truth, the Ethiopian asked a profound question. What prevents me from being baptized? This moment was historic. Right then and there, Philip baptized him in the water by the roadside, making the Ethiopian eunuch the first recorded African Christian. Long before European missionaries brought Christianity to Africa, it was already there. This man took the message of Jesus back to Ethiopia, planting seeds of faith that would grow into one of the world's oldest Christian traditions. His story proves that Black people were among the first believers, not simply receivers of the faith, but pioneers. Christianity was never a foreign religion to Africa. It was embedded in its history from the very beginning. The Ethiopian eunuch's story reminds us that faith, wisdom, and divine purpose have always been part of Africa's legacy. Cush, known today as modern-day Ethiopia and Sudan, is one of the most frequently mentioned nations in the Bible, symbolizing strength, endurance, and divine purpose. From Genesis to Revelation, Cush is not portrayed as a forgotten land, but as a mighty nation with a prophetic destiny. Psalm 68:31 declares, "Princes shall come out of Egypt. Ethiopia shall soon stretch out her hands unto God." This is not just a poetic statement, it is a prophecy. It speaks of a time when Cush will rise in spiritual prominence, reaching toward God in faith and power. This verse signifies that Africa was always meant to play a role in God's divine plan, not as a land of suffering, but as a land of purpose and redemption. Cush's influence can also be seen in the story of Ebed-Melech, an Ethiopian who rescued the prophet Jeremiah from a cistern when others had abandoned him. God later rewarded Ebed-Melech for his faithfulness, proving that Cushites were not only present, but were honored in biblical history.